Hello, friends. Robert Bevan here, author of the Caverns and Creatures series of novels and short stories. With me today is Sam West, and we will be talking about the spell Animal Shapes. Animal Shapes. That sounds like cookies. However,
It does.
And
It sounds like something you read your kindergartner.
Yeah, and I was looking at the text of the spell itself, and I don't often get to higher levels. I've never used Animal Shapes. It doesn't seem that amazing. However, reading Sam's spell review, yeah, there's more than meets the eye. So Sam, why don't you hit us with the good stuff?
Animal Shapes is bananas. This is one of my favorite spells in the game. It's also one of the most game breaking spells, but in a really fun way, in my opinion.
Sure.
So this has a lot of text on it. The gist of it is you pick any number of creatures, and that's a very important word, is any number, that you can see within range of you. They do have to be willing, so you can't be like, yeah, you also have to be a squirrel. But in doing so, you can transform them basically into whatever you want. That's a beast that's larger, smaller, CR4 or less. So once again, we get to be in the fun category of, well, we have a garbage CR system. How does that make this spell perform? And the answer is very well. Animal Shapes is mass wild shape as an 8th level spell and has some really interesting implications and tactics you can take with it to turn it from just everyone gets to be a bear and I guess we do bad damage in the party to the big bad has to deal with unstoppable quantities of hit points, every ability written on a beast, all at the same time. It is yucky good. This is a spell that has the fun downside of being concentration in a way that I think makes it 10 times more interesting and will absolutely lead to some circumstances where you will be in way over your head and way overconfident. I love that kind of magic.
All right. Let's get into now. It says willing creatures.
Yes.
So you cannot cast this on like a bucket of ants that you've collected.
No, unless for some reason you can, well, I mean, you're a druid, right? So if you are like a swarm keeper that speaks with the animals and charms them, then yeah, they can become willing and you can animal shapes them.
Now, you can charm like any number of creatures with that?
Depending on the magic. I don't know all of the specifics for like swarm keepers and stuff, but I'm sure you could find ways to do that kind of gimmicky stuff with this. That's not the most.
I'm talking about thousands and thousands of ants.
Yeah. And I'm saying it's Dungeons and Dragons. It's probably possible. They're going to be homebrew magic items and other garbage that's going to lead way to that. And again, swarm keeper rangers or druids, that seems like their shtick. But normally, no. Normally, you're not going to get literally billions of creatures in this. Normally, You're not taking all of the animal kingdom, turning them into giant scorpions and mauling something for too much damage. But you will be doing too much damage with this.
Or bacteria.
Yeah. More realistically, what's happening is you find a well-regulated militia of people around town that are sick and tired of that damned necromancer and all that evil bullshit that he's been up to. And you can, all right, team, here's the strat. All 40 of you get as close to me as you can. I'm going to turn us all into moles. We're going to burrow underground and travel because this spell lasts 24 hours, however long we need you to get underneath his toes. We're all going to pop up simultaneously. I'm going to turn you all into giant scorpions, or we're going to destroy him. And that's going to do absurd amounts of damage. This spell, giant scorpions were all started as like one of the more powerful things you can do with the spell. They get 3 attacks, all get +4 to hit, but whenever you have 40-ish of them, that's going to kill somebody. That's 120 attacks if you can like stack and move things appropriately as turn order starts to happen. Very munchkin-y. Definitely not given, but it's something you can do with this spell. That's a really powerful thing out of the gate. The next really powerful thing to note about the spell, outside of just using it as we have the ability to get a bunch of willing creatures to be better monsters, like a bunch of peasants become CR4 creatures, you can functionally give them infinite hit points, which is really cool. So long as you don't break concentration on this. Because every turn as an action, you can switch their forms from one form to another. And when they do that, they assume the new statistics of those monsters. The highest HP monster that I'm aware of is the Plesiosaurus that fits within this category and has 68 hit points. If you switch between that and the next highest, the giant scorpion of 52, if something isn't doing 52 or more damage at once, plus whatever hit points the creature has, you're refilling it every turn as an action just back to 68, back to 52, back to 68, back to 52, making very high HP enemies that functionally can't die while also getting the stat blocks of better monsters than the peasants that we're talking about prior.
All right, now I'll take it a step further. Can you change it from a plesiosaurus to a different plesiosaurus?
I think so. I don't know for sure. I would hazard a guess yes, because you're turning them into a beast of form larger, smaller, and then on subsequent turns you transform them into new forms. I think new forms could be ambiguous enough to say different plesiosaurus. I also think you could definitely rule it as a no, it has to be a different physical monster. It matters very little in the context of the spell. Another neat thing about it is you don't have to have the creatures all be the same. You can transform everyone into different things for all you'd like, which is neat when you're looking at things like giant toads and giant spiders, because they come with neat status effects. So like spiders have a web shot that can root things in place from a distance. And whenever you're dealing, again, hypothetically, in the beautiful magical Christmas land environment where you have 30 peasants willing to go along with this with you, you can turn like 10 of them into spiders, lock down the back line, the rest of the giant scorpions maul things. And then you also have the upside of being able to swap them back and forth if you have to, or just keep resetting them to the same things to make their hit points pool enormous and unkillable. It'll feel that way. This is a spell that, if allowed to be abused, which it definitely is, it can be hard to not allow it to be abused this way, will be game warping. And your druid all of a sudden is a lightning rod, where the DM's only objective is to get them to drop concentration on this, because it lasts 24 hours. And it can just win fights, just outright on its own. That being said, taking 30 peasants in, you animal shapes them into giant scorpions. Round 1, they're doing great. Round 2, the Lich drops your concentration on this with a ranged spell attack. You now have a bunch of 5 HP commoners with rocks in their hands that are going to do their best and just die to a cloud kill, right? And all of a sudden, all the magic's gone. And you're like, oh, crap, I can't believe I just massacred all those people. And you have the consequences of those actions, which I think is super neat. Now, granted, you can be like, you can say, regardless of what's happening up there, I'm going to be a mole 30 feet under the ground, spamming the transformations and just hoping they know what to do. That's a way to break this. But then that's when you start sending ant kegs after the player, and you start doing some things where you're trying to play these weird druidy metagames of tracking down the tiny little druid. This is the kind of thing that's definitely going to be more fun for the druid than everyone else at the table. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing more than like one of these encounters per campaign, and then talking to the druid and being like, okay, you had your fun. You did the animal shapes thing. Maybe we reel it back and we use the more practical applications of it that are more fair. And honestly, those are actually pretty decent too. An 8th level spell slot is kind of a tall order, but being able to swap between flight, swim, breathing underwater, all of that for 24 hours makes exploration really easy. It's the kind of thing where you can just cast this on the whole party if you don't need them to use their class features and stuff and their spell casting and whatnot, and you can just use it as a navigable tool to go through whatever environments you need to in a whole suite of different ways, getting burrow speed, getting blind sight, getting fly speed. Again, if a monster CR4 or lower has the ability, you can get that monster at will. You can just be like, you are that right now. And that's really useful, especially whenever you're looking at things like keen sense, when you're trying to perceive specific things. This is a tool that gives you the whole suite of monster abilities on command. And that even regardless of the munchkin cheesy bullshit of summoning, 30 giant scorpions out of nowhere to kill somebody with infinite hit points, this is still a practically useful spell in many ways. It's definitely not degenerate when used in the way that only you're using on the party members, but it's still very good and useful, and I'd be happy to have it as a druid regardless.
Yeah, but all those practical uses are really lame compared to what you opened with. You should have done this in reverse.
Sure. Again, you hear these kinds of things, right? And you think about you being the person doing it, right? When you're the guy at the table that is doing the thing with all of the beasts, with all of the commoners with infinite hit points that you're just abusing like crazy because the monsters aren't doing more than 40 damage around to every single creature around you. You can, once you see it once, you're like, oh my God, that was the coolest thing ever. I sat there for an hour and a half while the druid just won the fight. The next time it happens, you'd be like, wait, you're just doing the same thing over and over again still. And I'm still just sitting here waiting for it to be over. And the third time that happens when you aren't the player doing the animal shapes thing, it starts to be like, yeah, okay, I get the gimmick. I get you're doing it. It's powerful. I don't really have fun with this anymore. The druid's probably still having a blast. But it's the kind of thing that you definitely don't want to lean into and be like, yeah, this is just the whole game now. We are at the stage of play where there's going to be these kinds of munchkin generic garbage that's going to pop up a lot. Eighth level spells and like sixth level plus spells are all going, not all, but a lot of them are going to have these kinds of munchkiny ways that you can manipulate them to do some pretty degenerate stuff. Animal Shapes happens to be one of my favorite ripe ones for abuse. You probably, I would recommend playing it. Rules is written once or twice, and then rules is intended where it's less of the however many creatures can I get within 30 feet of me kind of version of it. That's my recommendation, at least.
Yeah, or like you said before, have the DM take some countermeasures.
Sure.
Yeah, let them have their fun once or twice, and then yeah, show them you're still in charge.
There's probably a really fun game to be had in figuring out similarly busted builds like this and letting the DM just take any means necessary to counteract them in really fun ways, right? Like I'm envisioning worlds where like you're allowed to have 9, 10, 8 level spell slots and you're sending off platoons of these unending hit point creatures and the DM sending like meteors from the sky to kill them and the wizards stopping time to interact with the meteors to keep the animal shaped things alive. We're in super high magic. Martial classes are unusable. Definitely the kind of crazy, wonky, wild garbage that the upper old like 3.5 editions got into. You can kind of facilitate a little bit of that in 5th edition. If you really want to do that, though, I would recommend just going and playing 3.5. There's just so much stupid garbage that you can do in that edition. The game is not fair in any way, shape, or form. Regardless, if you want to facilitate that and already like playing 5e and you're like, okay, how about we all sit down, we Google it for 2 hours to find some really nuts builds. We can sit down at the table, the DM preps for the weekend, and we just have 8 hours of utter nonsense, garbage, bullshit explosions. That could be fun once in a while. And that's where you play Animal Shapes this way.
All right. You got anything else to say about this?
5 out of 5 spell. Busted.
Yeah. All right, everyone. That was Animal Shapes. Thank you, Sam. And thank you, watchers and listeners, for watching and listening. See you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching. If you found this helpful, informative, or entertaining, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button below. You needn't smash it. A gentle tap will suffice. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to the channel. And make sure you check out the links in the description where you'll find my Caverns and Creatures series of comedy fantasy novels, Sam's full review of the spell, and other fun things.